Campeones, ¿qué pasa? Welcome to another Churros. It is that time of the week where I'm going to be going over your questions. Yes, indeed, it is the podcast dedicated to y'alls. To y'alls? To y'alls. It is the Q&A part of Churros. We got a ton of questions to get through. No Kian this week, but I will try to do my very best to do your questions justice. So let's get right into the thick of things. Like I said, a lot of questions coming your way, and this is the spot where you're gonna get them solved, the churros and your questions. So without any further ado, in chronological order, why don't we start with the very first question from Denny. He's asking, Diego, are you ready to admit that Raphinha is the best Barça player since Flick arrived, considering the consistency, unlike Yamal, and a good sample size of how Barça looked like without him? Should he have been backed instead of Lamine in last year's Ballon d'Oro? Well, Denny, quite frankly, I think you got a pretty solid point here, at least a debate that can be held whether or not Raphinha has been Barca's best player and whether or not he should have been backed over Lamine Yamal in the race for the Ballon d'Oro. Quite frankly, when you're talking about reliability, when you're talking about consistency, when you're talking about maturity, yes, I think Raphinha has the strongest case in terms of having been the best player for Football Club Barcelona. Mind you, we're leaving out a big elephant in the room here, and that is Pedri. I think the debate, who has been Barca's best player, if you're not including Pedri in that conversation, you're doing something wrong, at least when we're looking at last year, since we're talking about the Ballon d'Oro period of the last campaign. Pedri needs to be in that conversation, but I'm happy to say Raphinha was clearly overlooked, and I think that Raphinha should have gotten a bigger backing, whether it's from the club, whether it's from the fans, whether it's even from us, people like me and other fans, journalists, commentators, opinionators, haters. We should have backed Raphinha stronger. It's clear that Barca, without him, we've been missing him dearly, right? The rare nights where he has been off have disproportionately come. Barca, I mean, the nights that Barca have been off have been disproportionately coming when he has been missing. In fact, 4 of Barca's 5 defeats came when Raphinha was missing. And it was because of him that many times he pulled us out of the trenches, giving us that goal, giving us that run, giving us that assist, giving us that ball progression, interception, ball recuperation, the right association. It was so many times Raphinha, and the fact that he finished, I think it was 5th, right, in the Ballon d'Oro race. Definitely, obviously, behind Dembélé and Lamine Yamal, was an absolute disgrace. The amount of points that he got, Flick mentioned in a press conference as well, the fact that he was not even included in the FIFA starting 11. He's been grossly overlooked, the Brazilian. When Flick came, he had one foot out the door. His time with Xavi certainly wasn't as fruitful. Luckily, the two managed to build a fantastic bond and relationship. I want to call it father-son like. He has been El Capitan, the captain, the leader, the person that has really stood up for the team, both on and off the pitch. And again, it's just a different Barca when he is not there. And also, when he's having a rare off night, you can tell as well. So, having said that, I think Lamine Yamal's ceiling is higher. Does that make sense? I think Lamine Yamal, who still is just at the ripe age of 18, of course, has a lot more to grow, a lot more to show. And I think Raphinha is more of the finished product. Also, having said that, I'm not taking anything away from Lamine Yamal and his greatness. What we saw last season, this season, again, I think, and I say again because I mentioned in a previous podcast, I think Lamine Yamal is being grossly overlooked and shat on for all the wrong reasons. When you look at his, just from a numbers perspective, statistically, he's actually putting up better numbers than what he was doing last season. So it's quite interesting how people kind of already are rolling their eyes and overlooking, I think, what Lamine Yamal is continuing to produce, even though it might not be as eye catching. We place so much emphasis on, of course, the goals, the assists, but what he does off the ball and his work rate, I think, needs to be, quite frankly, not just talked about more, but celebrated a whole lot more and praised a lot more. Yet, where do you put these two players? I think it's a father picking which of his kids is his favorite. It's very hard to do. I have a favorite. Not gonna say no. I don't. I don't have a favorite, or do I? Uh, it's tough. And I, even also in this case, I wouldn't really know who to say. Okay, this is my. There might be personal favorites, but I wouldn't go so far to say this is the better player for me. Like I said, I think in a nutshell, Raphinha is the more finished product, and perhaps also a more consistently reliable one for the moment. Even that, I can't really say that sentence without cringing a little bit anyway. But I do think that Lamine Yamal is the greater talent, and his ceiling is a whole lot higher. Let me just put it that way. And by the way, Denny is also asking a part B here. What is your take on Atletico and Simeone? Is he the best? Is this the best that he can do? And would they do better with someone else or worse? So, the Atletico question, this is sort of the standard Atletico question I think we get from time to time, several times in the season. And I think that the net positive is still there. Simeone is still a net positive for Atletico, I think. Replacing him, I can't even imagine the task for the next coach to make sure, to guarantee pretty much that Atletico consistently will be in the top three, finish in the top three regardless. I know that right now they're not, right? Let me just double check here. I said that with a lot of security, but I think they're in fourth or in fifth right now, if I'm not mistaken, with Villarreal still in third. Right, in fourth. So, but I do think, I want to think that Atletico will finish in third, something that he has managed to achieve consistently for, the longest time. There have been colchoneros now born that all they know is Diego Simeone as the head coach of their team, and that consistent top four. Can we at least say top four finish, right? That consistent Champions League spot finish is certainly something that, although not perfect, having the two biggest clubs in the world that you're having to compete with is something to be also celebrated. Something to be, yeah, it's noteworthy. Okay, you're going up against the two biggest clubs in the world, and budget aside, Atletico will always be the third wheel in that conversation, right? So the fact that they have pretty much secured that, there was a time where Atletico was in second division. I witnessed that. I witnessed that. As crazy as that may sound, those el año en el infierno, right? The years, or the year in hell, was something that was actually happening. And this consistency and health, I think, as well, financially, there's a stability there, and they're a serious contender, or a serious uh, contender slash opponent in the cups, in the European Cups. They've had European glory, Champions League glory, nearly, but finished off in quite cruel fashion, if you ask me, still manipulated fashion, in that supposed double touch in the penalty shootout against the Huats. Obviously, the two final finishes as well very cruel the way those ended, but the European glory was achieved in the Europa Cup, or como se llama, the Europa the Europa League. You could tell I'm old, man. The Europa Cup, uh, the titles in LaLiga as well, won also in questionable fashion. Hey, but at least we got all of the they got all of the culés to stand up for them in the Camp Nou and applaud them when they won La Liga that year. You know, Cup glory. They're contenders, and they're a tough opponent and a tough matchup. So it's no longer the small Atleti. It's now an elite Atleti, and changing that. Look, if the club is genuinely ready to shift identity and become a side that focuses much more on control, on proactive dominance, on gambling big, I suppose, less pragmatic, more brave. You guys know that these are words that I like to utter and regurgitate on a weekly basis, and I will continue to do that, especially for these sides that have the budget to play a more attractive style of football on a weekly basis. It's a big gamble, but you know, I think for now, because Simeone isn't just a coach there, he's pretty much their entire identity, right? Their operating system is going to take so much to not to overtake, but to reemplazar, ay Dios, no me salen las palabras hoy, to overtake, to replace him. Um, I think my point is, I think Atleti will be worse off for it, at least in the short term. I don't know about in the long term. Depends who the coach will be. I think there's certainly great names. ¿Cómo se llama? De Zerbi, Slot, maybe even if he leaves Liverpool, or Potter. I don't know. I think there could be interesting coaches that could definitely work with the team, the club that they have, and change their identity and use that budget and players for a different style of football. But I think he's going to leave a big shadow, and casting that over the next person. I think they'll be haunted by his absence for at least some time. All right, Chris saying, I enjoyed your comment, by the way, Chris. Thank you for that. You said, Diego, did you enjoy Jude's celebration? I think it was aimed at you and your speculation. I did. I know it, and I had to think the same. Not that I was the one that reported that. Again, I'm just a mere messenger, but I did mention to Kian that, yes, Bellingham, his nickname has become JB, and it's not JB for Jude Bellingham, but it's JB for the wiki. JB Wiki. And he's been spotted in the late night hours closing down clubs, discotecas. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. I enjoyed the celebration. Those were fun, and obviously aimed at those people that put those rumors out into the space, out into the wild for us, all of us to speculate over. I enjoyed it. Doubt it was aimed at me though, but I did enjoy it. Yeah. All right, Pranav has got a very long-winded comment/question here. Basically, Pranav, I'm going to abbreviate it to Vini, Ronaldo, the OG Ronaldo, fat Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, and Neymar. The question is GOAT. The question is the bigger talents. The question is, if we agree that Ronaldinho and Ronaldo at their prime were GOAT level, their overall careers aren't the most extraordinary. Definitely didn't reach the peak that we would have expected or hoped. And is Vini already leapfrogging the achievements collectively of those players? Look, you mentioned Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Neymar, Vini. I think we can all come to a consensus here that Vinícius Jr. is the least talented of the four. Yet he has an absolute chance, a good chance, to have a better overall career. I thought, Pranav, you made an interesting point here mentioning that, and had to do some, little checking, double checking here, because you're talking about one, Ronaldo Nazario, a generational freak, technically, physically, speed, the ability to make decisions in a split of a second, turn away from the defender with the ball that looked glued to his feet. A goal scoring machine, so efficient, even with the weight problems. He continued to put them into the back of the net. You're talking about Dinho, a pure footballing joy and genius, the man child, half man, half amazing. I'm not shy to say, I think one of my favorite footballers of all time. Genuinely, probably the footballer that I enjoyed watching. I got excited, like giddy, like a kid waking up at Christmas every time that I got to see him, let alone in person, but on TV. Yes, obviously Messi, I think, is the GOAT, in undisputed, but Ronaldinho, that footballing genius, that surprise factor, the wow factor, the ability to do anything at any given time with the ball, that left not just the crowd but opponents stunned as well. And Neymar, technically as well, one of the best, most complete Brazilian attacking football players ever, who, of those three in this conversation, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Neymar, left the most to be desired, but in his peak, during his prime, was, just because he played alongside Messi, a second fiddle, but Ballon d'Oro worthy. And then Vini, who has got elite speed, technical ability, I think, as well, even though his finishing, which has improved, still lets him down. His mentality, you guys know what I think of Vini. I think, I think he's repulsive and despicable. I do. I do. And it's only not because he wears the white shirt. It's his mentality and his attitude that leaves so much to be desired and hurts him, quite frankly. And again, if you don't want to take my word for it, I think we all pretty much know that's why he didn't win the Ballon d'Oro. That's the impression and the taste in the mouth that many are left with as well when they watch Vini play, and it's to his detriment. Now, career-wise, Vini, yes, he's got multiple Champions Leagues, and was a worthy contender of the Ballon d'Oro, and the main man at Real Madrid at a very early age, right, in his early mid-20s. He's obviously dropped off drastically. I don't know, in terms of discipline, if he's durable, if he's hyper professional. I think it's still there. I don't think it's all wasted and faded away. I think this might just be a blimp, but he still has so much more to prove. And if injuries are not a hindrance, I hope for you, Pranav, and all other Vini fans, that his lifestyle and mentality will not be a hindrance for him to get back to this level that got him into a position to at least compete and be in a conversation about being a Ballon d'Oro. But I don't think, talent-wise, which you pointed out as well, he will never reach the level of a Neymar, of a Dinho, and a Ronaldo. But he could absolutely achieve them in terms of trophies. Perhaps longevity, legacy. Longevity, legacy is a big word. He's going to be overlooked in that kind of Mount Rushmore of Brazilian talents that wowed us, that enamored us, that got us in our seats just to watch them play. I don't think he's that guy, you know. Pero bueno, to each their own, and I'm sure Pranav, you have strong feelings probably that oppose mine. So I'm happy to continue this debate. Pranav, you also asked about Mbappe versus Brazilian Ronaldo. The same logic, really, and perhaps even clearer. Talent and peak. Ronaldo has had, from my eye test, has had one of the highest ceilings in football I've ever seen. 1996, 97, obviously Barça, Ronaldo. I might be biased here, but that was one of the greatest footballing seasons and spectacles that I've ever seen from a player. Uh, but that continued, right? It continued at Inter, and unfortunately, those injuries that stunted his growth, his consistency, and his development. At least we got to see another formidable version of Ronaldo in, let's say, like 2002, that World Cup winning season, and when he decided to join the Whites, into still being, a lethal goal scorer with some with some insane dribbles, which was so crazy to see. I don't know if you guys got to see it or remember from what you've seen on YouTube, but it was so funny to see this fat ass Ronaldo, and I'm calling the fat ass Ronaldo. He was so overweight, man. He was partying way too much in them days. Yet still, he would make a mockery out of defenders, and that it just looked so funny. It was like, God damn, look at it just looked wrong, and you almost you were like, what is going on over here? But that was his genius. That was his talent, right? Now, career trajectory, Mbappe, I think he'll be more durable. At least that's what we're seeing so far. I think we'll see a more consistent year to year output from the Frenchman because of his durability, because of his health. He's playing in an era where there's obviously better medical services, sports science, squad protection, player protection. I would argue as well. So yes, he could outscore Ronaldo. He could play longer at an elite level and therefore win more trophies. But peak Ronaldo will always be greater than Mbappe Ronaldo in my eyes. In my eyes. Um, Dinho, Ronaldo, GOAT level at their prime. Yes, 100%. I would. I was telling my kids this earlier today. We were, funny enough, scrolling through my phone, watching a few highlights of Ronaldinho. I said I would give anything to be able to rewind the time and watch him play at that level again. 2004 to 2006. Uh, he just made it look. It was magical. It just looked unfair. You know, it was fun and unfair at the same time. Ronaldo made defenders look helpless, whereas Dinho made a mockery of them. You know what I'm saying? They were just their absolute best, and yeah, GOAT tier talents. 100%. 100%. All right, I'm gonna move on over here to the next question, which is aimed for Kian from Christian Ramirez, saying, I had to laugh when I read this one because I know that this is. I was told that this is an old narrative that people, Madridistas in particular, are tired of me bashing Madridistas and Real Madrid over the head over. I'm going to be probably a little bit short on this one, Christian, just because it was a week ago where we got into a heated exchange and argument over this exact topic. And he's saying, Kian, what's your take on the past Clásico, how Real Madrid played in the first half? As a Barça fan, I find it incredibly disappointing how a team of Madrid's caliber with their players playing a low block. More frustrating is the fact that it almost worked against us. Surely you're disappointed too, right? Well, Christian, like I said, go to the podcast. I think it was like literally last week. Yes, he's disappointed, but he also backs it. How should I say? It's classic Real Madrid. It's classic Madridista where what is the saying in English? The means defy the end defies the means, something like that. I'm probably butchering that, but uh, it's basically the outcome is what matters most for Real Madrid. And I was critical of it. I remain critical of it. I don't think that a club, a team with the talent and the budget should be opting to playing small club football. I excuse the more humble sides for taking that approach. For example, a Santander, an Albacete, you know, it's survive, and see if you can punish and outrun and beat a goalkeeper in a one-on-one situation in the chance that you find yourself in a situation like that. But when you have players like Bellingham, when you have players like Vini, Rodrigo, Valverde, Mbappe, etc., Madrid, in my opinion, shouldn't be hiding, right? You want to be going toe to toe. And it's this pragmatic style. Yes, it's an easier style of football, and it's more often prized than clubs that take the initiative. I will take that to the grave with me. We will go through championship teams runs, and I'm sure that there's more teams that won trophies taking that approach, this again, reactive approach, as opposed to the proactive, more creative, more brave style of football. And us Barca fans, we just view it differently, right? I think to each their own, but to see a club with the talented players like Madrid take that approach, I think it's shameful, quite frankly. You got and again, that's for Real Madrid. That's not for all clubs. It's a low block. It in and of itself isn't shameful, but when Real Madrid with the squad choose to play scared, it tells me that they have that's what I told Kian, that they respect Barca, they fear Barca so much. They know that what they're exposing themselves to is probably una manita, another 5-goal drubbing, and they're trying to minimize that and maximize their time on the ball in punishing Barça, and they just don't trust themselves with it. So, I'm happy again to take this argument on with anyone, but it seems that Madridistas are a little bit tired of it. So, Christian, thanks for your question, though. I appreciate it. Much appreciated. All right, moving on to the next one from Santos Solorzano. This past weekend, Real Sociedad were leading Barça 1-0 at home in the 70th minute. Rashford scored the equalizer, but just a minute later, Real struck again to make it 2-1. Diego, who's to blame for Barça's loss? Real Madrid, because Barcelona had a goal disallowed earlier in the match. I think we had like 5 goals disallowed. No. Yeah, we had like 3 goals disallowed. Or Barça themselves for conceding immediately after leveling the score. Churros. All right, no excuses here. It's all the Whites' fault. Blame the Whites. It's always the Whites. Them damn Whites. Look, man, that game against Real Sociedad was insane. We hit the post 5 fucking times. We had 3 goals disallowed, and yes, especially in one of them, where Lamine Yamal was called for offside por un puto taco, for a cleat. That VAR image was not clear whatsoever. Yet it was ruled for offside thanks to Mathano, and it was just a disgusting match because 9 times out of 10 Barca would have won that. And I'm happy to admit, for example, like that game, take the derby against Espanyol, first game of the year. That was a game where we probably should have lost if it wasn't for San Juan Garcia. But we won. This game, we should have won because we were the better team. We scored more goals. We had 3 disallowed, 5 times hitting the post. It was bad luck. And The conceding right after scoring a goal, I cannot put that on bad luck. I can't put that on the Juans neither. That's bad game management, and I'm critical of that. We saw that in the Champions League as well against Slavia Praga. Again, conceding very quickly. That's the uncomfortable truth of this Barca side for the moment, right? It's there's no easy games. Everything is an emotional roller coaster, and the poor defensive positioning is still, and I would say also the switching off of concentration is still our Achilles heel. Too many times an individual error is made or a defensive frailty mistake is being capitalized on and exposed by our opponents, even when they are not elite, even when they are an Eastern European team that have scored only 2 goals in the entire league phase so far, and they're double their goal tally in one game against us. Even when it's a more humble side like Racing de Santander or Real Sociedad that is in their third coach so far this season, they make the most of their chances and expose our defensive frailty. That's where I'm critical, and that's where I'm like, what I would like to ask Hansi Flick, what did the team learn, you and the team learn, and how did you correct, or are you correcting the mistakes that knocked us out of the Champions League semifinal when we had already one foot in the final with just minutes to go? Because we're seeing the same mistakes being repeated, and like I said, I call it the uncomfortable truth, but we have to, because it is, and it has to be addressed, and it's something that I find very concerning to still at this stage, a year and a half now into the Flick era, with as enamored as I am of the German man, my favorite German of all time, and this team, while I continue to see them become repeat champions of LaLiga, the Copa, the Super Copa is in the bag. But can we learn from the mistakes that knocked us out of the top European competition? And also, just have more control over the game as opposed to having to repeatedly make these, although entertaining, these kind of heroic comebacks, remontadas. It's a little bit, coño, es que me gustaría un partido con menos, like with menos pulsaciones, like with just be good to my heart. I'm at a certain age now. I would like to just sit there, relax, and enjoy a goal fest, goals galore, without all the stress. Tribit Mitra, what's good, Joe? Thanks for your question here. And look, let me take it as a whole, because you're making a very strong point here. It seems to be quite clear that Real Madrid play better when they face mid to high block teams. City, Betis, Bilbao, Monaco, and Barça are examples of these. Granted, we lost the Clásico, but there's a reason Kian says that it's easy to match up for us against the Culés or against Barça and Atletico. In transition attacks, our transition attacks are quite good against these teams, but only when we have a high volume of transition attacks, often due to wastefulness on behalf of our attackers, specifically Vini. In the second Clásico, the number of counterattacks was stifled by Barça as we suffered as a result. Monaco was a repeat in that sense, that we had a lot of transitions and the line was high. As a result, people like Vini had a great performance. This, however, will not be true against most games in La Liga, and also games in the Champions League where big teams will see the scouting report and just sit back and counter us. Sound familiar? It is on this premise that I believe that unless we start efficiently breaking down the low blocks, that we as Madridistas cannot actually start getting excited for the team. Until then, the odd good performances against high lines will skew our perception of the team and its need for high volume transitions due to our wastefulness. The odd we are back and Vinny's back narratives will continue and be few from far between until we figure this out. Thoughts? Well, I think you make a very strong point. I think the premise is basically correct. And the short answer is yes, Real Madrid are optimized for chaos but not control. I think that they, given their individual talents, can feast on mid to high blocks, and like you said, struggle in the games where they're asked to create patiently and actually show that they have a sense of associative football. Does that make sense? City, Betis, Barça, the teams that you mentioned, Madrid have space to attack. You can put a ball into space, and you know that with the pace, Vini will get to it, and Mbappe will get to it, and with that talent can, and I hate to be redundant here, but beat a goalkeeper or a defender or two in a 1v1 situation like we have seen. Vini's been absolutely devastating in that scenario. In fact, he scored potentially his best goal of his career so far against Barça in that final of the Supercopa. But that second Clásico mattered so much because Barça, we didn't just win, but we managed to really kind of starve Madrid from playing that transition type football, right? Or in the second half, defensive line was a little bit lower. We had fewer broken plays. Of course, we honed the possession as well, but we managed to minimize the counterattacks. There was less chaos, and therefore we made Madrid look very, I think, blunt, and also a team that just didn't have a good no tienen una propuesta. They don't have a footballing proposal that is able to compete with Barça right now. I don't think it was accidental. I think it came down to, let's say, a tactical denial of Xavi Alonso that Flick managed to get over him that eventually cost him the job. Now, will Arbeloa do a better job in the next upcoming Clásico? And I think it's May. I think that remains to be seen. Obviously, now everybody is on the Arbeloa bandwagon after falling off of it. It was first Zizou 2.0, then it was Arbeloa out. We've got Klopp ready to sign, and now it's, hey, Arbeloa is a fucking genius. Meanwhile, Mourinho keeps taking shots at him, saying, I can't believe that player or coaches without any history are coaching the big clubs. Was that a indirect shot at his quote-unquote friend Arbeloa? I don't know. Anyway, I'm digressing here. But yes, clearly the low block continues to be a problem and an issue for teams that Real Madrid face. They don't like teams that sit deep. They don't like teams that deny them space. It forces Real Madrid to break them down structurally, which under Xavi Alonso, that propuesta again, that proposal, that idea just didn't resonate with the players, and it wasn't executed in a way that was fruitful or successful for them. They're a team that rely on their on the volume of transitions, right? And it's true what you said, that the finishing can be wasteful, as I pointed out as well. I think that Vini, although he has improved on his finishing abilities, leaves a margin of improvement, a steep one at that, if you compare him to other Brazilian greats. But and just the whole positional play, I think Madrid is a team that leaves a lot to be desired. Now, will our perception remain skewed until the end of the season, where potentially they can pick up silverware? It's possible. Right now, with the Juaz just 1 point behind Barça, this is one of the poorest Real Madrid sides that we have seen in quite some time, with the permission of last season. But the reality is, just the 1 point difference with Barça makes me very uncomfortable. And, can Madrid prove that they can sustain the pressure, that they can score without chaos, whether they can manipulate low blocks? It's not a guarantee. Nothing is fixed yet permanently, I think. So this false confidence can continue, but maybe that's all they need to win the league, and it will then be exposed in the next season. It wouldn't be the first time that I see that happen, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers as well, where you see a Real Madrid side that, quite frankly, isn't impressive on the eye, bag some silverware and buy, in this case, Arbeloa some time. We'll see. We'll see. It's a good point, though. So thanks very much for your question. Next up is Khalid, also asking two back-to-back questions. The first one is about the Champions League. This team can win the Champions League by relying on its strength against big sides such as Arsenal, PSG, Bayern, and City. This team, you're referring to Barça, I'm going to assume. Physical power, fast transitions, exploiting spaces. Or no, is this Real Madrid? A medium defensive block. Our main problem arises against Chelsea, Inter, Atletico, defending the low block. So it's a similar question here, I would say, as Tribit. And in short, yes, Real Madrid can win the Champions League by relying on its strengths, individual strengths. And of course, the draw needs to cooperate here, the luck of the draw. And that goes for any team for that matter. And what you describe as like a matchup depending on the contender, that's not universally a dominant one. You know, it's, yeah, like I think that's the case for all teams, though. You know, Khalid, Madrid are dangerous against elite sides. They can be dangerous against the Arsenals, the QSGs, the Bayerns, etc. And that's because they have incredible talent. They have physical power. They are explosive in transitions. And they can hurt teams on the counter when given the space. They have won Champions Leagues like that. They have won trophies like that. So no theory is needed. It's already, you know, the footprint, let's say, the blueprint is already there. So I think that they can do it. I never discard them and count them out of the race. So, but I do think, yeah, like the Tribit said as well in the previous questions, that they struggle more against teams with the low blocks. So the Atleticos, Inter will be an interesting matchup. Chelsea potentially as well, where that space disappears. You know, the transitions are less, they dry up, and Madrid are forced to actually come up with a footballing proposal and positional play, etc. Am I missing? There was something here about Trent. Oh yes. Instead of the main plan, which features Trent at the right back and Valverde as a right-sided midfielder. So what do you? So, but in low blocks, I mean, Trent's crossing is still going to need movement. Trent's crossing is still going to need off-ball movement, overloads. You know, Valverde at right back gives you defensive security, perhaps not as much creativity and ball movement, or ball movement as a Trent, but the doubts remain. I hope that this Madrid can absolutely win the Champions League. I hope that they remain a side that suffer against breaking down those low blocks. A lot will depend on the draw, and I continue to think that Madrid are not the finished product, not the complete team that we were fed by the media initially, and that Arbeloa is going to prove that he's a good man manager, but I think will leave a lot to be desired when it comes to actual or tactical also improvement for this Real Madrid side. All right, next. Now, still Khalid asking about Barça. A ver. Barcelona, Barça, a team that in reality is not among the strongest 8 in Europe. When you say in reality, do you mean that's your personal opinion? I can respect that. It's also on paper right now. We're tied for 8th. We're in 9th. 8 teams with 13 points. Absolutely insane. Anyway, a team that in reality is not among the 8 strongest in Europe. It lacks physical power and doesn't know how to defend. Its attacking football looks good against La Liga teams, a competition that has weakened in recent years, and that explains its performances. But when it faces top 8 teams in Europe, it'll be eliminated. Why does a player like Pedri shine in La Liga but fail to have the same impact in the Champions League? The first reason is lack of physical strength. The second is the level of protection he receives from referees in Spain in almost every physical contact. Dude, I respect your opinion. I disagree with pretty much every single point you're making. And the take is mostly wrong, again, in my opinion, because you're mixing myth with, like you're mixing physical with refereeing mythology here. And there's a clash. I don't think that we were eliminated last season from the Champions League because we were weaker than Inter. I think we were pecamos, o sea, we were guilty of being naive, but not because we were a weaker team than Inter de Milan. And if you think that, I think you didn't really watch those two games that were played between the Italian side and us. And I also definitely disagree that La Liga referees protect Pedri, who has been on the receiving end of absolute criminal, vicious tackles. I'm talking like Sergio Ramos on Messi type tackles where he just got booted from behind. I forget, it wasn't in Real Sociedad, he was taken down nasty, and Mazano didn't pull out the red card until he was called back by the dudes from VAR. Thank God for that occasion where he then changed the yellow to a red. But there was another occasion, I think it was the game before that, where again, it was like a Sergio Ramos-like tackle where he just got kicked the shit out of from behind. Not even a card was pulled. Maybe a yellow card, but definitely not a red card. That Pedri doesn't get protected is sheer cope, or that Pedri is getting protected rather. Sorry, is sheer cope in my opinion, and just an erroneous take. But yeah, we were eliminated against an elite side last season. That it was decided in margins. It was decided in a lack of experience, call it what you want, but definitely not because of Pedri or anything like that. I think Barça, we should be in the top 8. When you say that we're not, and if you're referring to the league standings, I can accept that, but I think that is deceiving. I think that we can compete in Europe consistently. I think we showed that last season. I think this season has been a disappointing one, where we should have had more control in games. I think we gave QSG a good run for their money at a time where we were also missing a whole lot of players. We've improved since then. Our low point was certainly Chelsea, who just steamrolled us. I don't think that would happen again. Even though it was an absolute humiliation, this isn't a team that is going to get run off the pitch in many games, neither in La Liga nor Europe. It's a team that is learning how to close out knockout games. It's a team that is still in process of being a finished product and having more control over the game and their opponents. And certainly defensively, we're missing key pieces there. Don't forget that we are a team that just simply haven't been able to operate neither in the transfer market to look for an elite world-class defender to help us out in that regard. We're talking about a team that just simply have been outspent by other top teams in Europe because of our the financial strain that we continue to operate under, even though it looks like we'll be hopefully soon talking about that in the past tense, because we've moved up second in terms of teams in the world with the most amount of income. Finally, thank you, Laporta, for sanitizing us in that regard. But yeah, we definitely lack some physicality, and I would love to be able to take to the transfer market to find that player, to find, let's say, a defensive midfielder and replace a Busquets for all of the Toni Kroos and Modric talk that I continue to hear from Kian on a weekly basis. I've never spoken about the post Messi era or a post Busquets. We've never managed to replace a Busi, who I think would be do this team so much good. Um, and with Pedri not being a physical player, neither was Xavi, neither was Iniesta, neither was David Silva, and he played in the Premier League, right? It's Pedri's case. It's all about timing. It's all about skill. It's all about honing the ball, controlling it. It's space interpretation. It's controlling the rhythm, dictating the tempo. Um, he disrupts, bro, and I want to take this as bait, but I think genuinely, if this is your take on Pedri, that's a false and flawed take. In terms of him, again, like him being protected, I hope that the examples that I brought up ring some bells, because if anything, I would say Pedri is one of the least protected players, and that's where the problem lies. We see it time and time again, right? The late reckless tackles from behind, where players hardly even get booked, let alone a yellow card. It's all very reminiscent of what Leo Messi had to go through, and it still happens to this day in Pedri and in the Champions League as well. So yeah, man. And for you to say that he doesn't shine in the Champions League, I'm sorry, I just can't take that serious. I really can't. I I disagree. You tell me a game, be specific, where you think that Pedri has been outplayed or hasn't showed up, and until then, I will beg to differ. I think he's in top three, top two, if not the best player of this Barca side when he's at his absolute prime. And yeah, let's move on. Thank you for your question, Khalid Shai. Saying, Diego, Vini just matched Xavi's career assist in the Champions League. Do you think that Vini is a genius or Xavi was overrated? Man, y'all trolling hard, huh? Trolling. Keon will be proud of you. Do you think that Vini? So trolling aside, here, trolling aside, Barca don't look good this season. Do you think it's a sophomore slump or worry that it'll worsen next season because opponents are figuring you out? All right, man. Again, I'm going to try not to take the bait here. I'm going to try to give you a reasonable, clean, grounded answer. Vini matching Xavi's Champions League assists. That's an interesting stat, though. I think whether he's a genius or Xavi overrated, I think neither. I think that premise is already flawed from a start. I think that Vini and Xavi played completely different roles and completely different the games in completely different contexts. I think that Xavi's value for Barça in LaLiga, in the Champions League, and for their success, it was all about control. It was all about tempo. It was all about progression. It was all about ball possession. It was all about it wasn't about finishing, right? It wasn't neither about giving the final pass for that matter, whereas Vini's job is exclusively that. As a winger, it is assisting or finishing himself coming out of transition, finding the space and breaking down defenses. So, assists really don't measure press resistance, game control, opponent suppression, or match rhythm. The all the previous things that I mentioned before. And if they did, then midfielders like Xavi would look a whole lot worse than wingers with which is absolute nonsense, of course. So is Vini elite at what he does? Yes, at times. Yes, we've seen him be elite. Was Xavi elite at what football actually runs on? Without a shadow of a doubt. But the comparison says more about this whole obsession behind stats, right? This whole stat culture than it does about the player themselves. That's not to say that, it's not a good stat for Vini to get. And as for Barca don't look good this season, we're better off in La Liga than we are this season, at this point this season, than where we were last season. Obviously, in Europe, the results haven't accompanied us. You could talk about a sophomore slump. I think that makes more sense than talking about a structural collapse, let's say, and that alarm bells need to be rung and it's warning signs. I think that scouting obviously has been done. I think that the homework is not yet done when it comes to finishing the problems that Barça have in the back. And that is mainly due, I think, as well, because of the departure of Inigo Martinez. So we haven't replaced him. And the sophomore slump of a player like Cubarsí, who was brilliant last season and has received a lot of criticism this season, as well as Koundé, Balde, Gerard Martin. We need to go to the market and find some help there quite desperately. But I don't think that we are actually worse than last season. I think it's less glamorous because we are kind of used to this now. The comebacks, the games where you're sitting at the edge of your seat. But yeah, opponents know what Barca want to do. So low blocks, physical targeting, tempo disruption, that's what we are faced with. There's less surprises and therefore more resistance. And I think that's normal as well after the first season of a new coach. But the real question is if Barça, if we do manage to add the layers with, new automatismos, get better defenders, have more variation, if we manage to stabilize that and also continue to grow our young players, then, I'm happy to continue to rely on these same patterns, on this same system, and assume that because of the talents alone and the brilliance of the technical staff of Flick and his ability to have players buy into his system and understand what he wants, that we are going to get better and not worse. But right now, we need to improve. We've hit maybe a bit of a stagnant phase, but I don't think that we can talk about a decline yet. I hope that makes sense. Guys, I kind of have to hurry here. I got a few more questions to go, but I have my son who is coming with a friend, and I need to say hi to the parents and stuff, so can't leave them hanging by the door. So let me see if I can still do justice to your questions. Sharma saying, I know you guys have discussed this in the past, but I don't think we're fully comprehending the transfer expenditure of a City, Chelsea, over the past 12, 18 months. They have spent between 4 to 600 million. I can't even imagine Madrid or Barça having 600 million available for transfers. I can't imagine Barça having 6. Man, the shots keep getting fired. You minions are relentless. Where the culés at? Christian, get your culé family on here. My question is, how would you spend 600 million if you had the budget? Transfers only. All right. I just said it in the last question. Elite defensive midfielder and defender. Put 100 mil, 120, I don't care. But get someone who can win duels, who can cover space, who can communicate, can lead by example, is able to also infect, like be contagious, like an Inigo Martinez was, who wasn't necessarily a world-class defender, but was able to get the defensive line and the defenders on board with him and coordinate them. That's the doorbell. All right, I'll take this. I'll be right back. I'm going to have to clip this, I guess. All right, I'm back. All good. All good in the hood. Little snippy. Y'all don't even know. I didn't even need to mention it, but that's the transparency that this podcast operates under. Full transparent, no filters, baby. Where did I leave out? I think I said defender, right? Elite. Then, same, más de lo mismo. Defensive mid. We needed 100 mil, 120. Get someone in to cover the Boosie hole. That just sounds so wrong. But you know what I'm saying. Let Pedri, Frankie breathe. We need somebody that can win those duels and get an elite defender and defensive midfielder and more defenders also on the wing backs. So top central defender, a leader, yes. We need that physicality, but also a starting right back and left back. They're needed. 70, 100 mil. Somebody that's reliable, somebody that's intelligent, that can help with the build up. Not a winger cosplay, but somebody who's actually also defensively sound and disciplined enough to track back. Who understands with a high footballing IQ, who understands the high trap, the high line, the offside trap. Get some players in for both the right and left back position. And then, add to squad depth. I don't think that we need a left winger, a world star left winger. I'm now thinking about what's the homeboy went to Bayern. Coño. Had we gotten a Luis Diaz, I wonder how that would have affected the Raphinha. I always said that even when Nico was in the conversation, even though I was open to the Nico conversation, I was open to having that debate. What worried me always with Luis Diaz was that he's a bona fide starter, and that with the Nico Williams, given his age as well, you could still kind of argue that he could come off the bench. Obviously, with a Marcus Rashford, that's a lot easier said and done. And I think that he's been, in terms of reliability, productivity, at least offensively, defensively, he needs to shape up. But he's fit that perfect mold of the the best sixth man, if you want to put it in basketball terms, like the perfect 12th man, the one coming off the bench and substituting Raphinha. But is Raphinha ready to take on a different position? Can he mold into a different role under Hansi Flick's system? So do we need a top left winger? I really don't know. I don't think world class left winger is what needed, but instead I would focus more on the striker for sure. Lewandowski has got his age, so put a 90 mil, find me a top world class striker. Haaland, Julian Alvarez is the one being talked about most. I want somebody that's clinical. I want somebody that's disruptive, that can rotate, that is versatile, multifaceted, that doesn't break the chemistry, the team chemistry, nor the weight structure neither. I'm cautious of that. And then just get I love, for example, the Rooney Bargy signing because of that. Get Lamine Yamal to rest a couple of games. Make sure you have a talented right winger as well in that regard, and somebody who can step it up at any given chance. I think that his performance in the Champions League this week was far from impressive, but that goes for the whole team. But in other games, he's really showed his worth, I think, and I'm expecting bigger and better things. All right. Last 2 questions to go. Brendan Powers. What up, Brendan? Brendan saying, look, I'm incredibly biased in this. Xavi is one of my favorite players of all time. Someone I met in San Sebastián years ago. Super nice guy, and I even asked him when he was going to coach Real Madrid, and he said, whenever the president wants me to. So I'm going to preface this by the fact that I love Xavi also to a fault. But I fear people are acting like Arbeloa is going to save the season because of one game. Did we smoke Monaco, who have been shit all season. Lost, yeah, they're like ninth in League On. I wasn't aware of that neither. They're definitely not the Monaco that we saw last season. Huh? Was it a Vini masterclass? Obviously, is Arbeloa going to get a better version of Vini? 100%, but we still have so many issues in this squad, and I fear this game may have been an exception, not the rule. Will Arbeloa get more out of the squad than Xavi did? Likely, because these players didn't respect Xavi, but I'm not ready to run to the hills like many people have. Am I being a hater? Que about I'm in the middle of a pun. You did not. You didn't do that just now. Okay. I'm not gonna talk to you. My son here is showing me his supposed homework. Um. So Brendan Powers. Man, you remind me of that. Your name always reminds me of that Simpson episode where Homer changes his name to Max Powers. Isn't it Max Powers? Max Powers. He's the man. All of a sudden, everything's working out for him, and luck is on his side. His hair grows back. Anyway, I'm having fun over here with your name. I think it's an awesome name, man. Brandon Powers. That Powers, I mean, that's one of the best last names I think you can ever wish for. So, do I think you're being a hater? No, I don't think you're being a hater. I think you're trying to be very rational. I think you're trying to be the opposite, probably, of what most of football Twitter looks like. And I think you're right as well to slow down the hype. I'm a little bit, surprised and impressed. I'll admit I didn't see the game against Monaco except for the highlights, and after seeing the score, I was quite frankly surprised by the high score line in which this game ended. But obviously, one game doesn't fix the season. Arbeloa right now lost one of the three cups that you guys were still fighting for, and that wasn't his fault neither. His first game in charge, although I'm still adamant about the fact that it was his fault for leaving 8 players home. Anyway, yes, Madrid smoked Monaco, and yes, from what it looked like, Vini had a good game. But you rightly point out that Monaco have been domestically very, very poor. Uh, from what I saw and heard as well from the pundits, they gave Madrid the high line. Everything that we just discussed, therefore, comes into play. They gave Madrid the space to exploit them. It was the best case scenario for Real Madrid and this squad. So, is it a turning point? I think that's premature. The game against Villarreal will be a bigger test. And that is tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So, um, what actually changed between Arbeloa and Xavi right now? And Xavi, I think that Kian rather will agree with me on this, that his man management will most likely be better, and his message will be more openly received. I think the emotional, right? There's an emotional connection there, an intensity maybe that Arbeloa will get from his players that was missing under Xavi. Will that translate into defensive discipline? Maybe he'll be even more pragmatic as a Xavi, because I think he's more limited in his footballing philosophy than a Xavi. And so players could buy in, because of that. But it's a lot of work still to be done. I don't think that breaking down low blocks is a solved issue. I don't think that structure, like a structural chance creation, is something that we're going to see on a weekly basis from this side at this point. And again, I think I'm very excited for this game against Villarreal, because I hold them at high regard. They're not third for no reason. So it's a few hours before kickoff, but I think that will be a game I'm going to sit down for and probably take some notes, because are they going to be able to, again, take a much more structural approach in trying to defeat and beat and be superior and dominate a Villarreal? That remains to be seen. Obviously, their finishing efficiency and the overall squad balance issues. It's that's systemic, right? It's not motivational. Um, from what I hear, the overall perception is that this squad has more of a feeling, a connection, a respect, if you will, with Arbeloa. I think his message is landing better, and so the reaction bounce. What was the word again? The new coach factor, whatever, is now coming into effect. I don't know how long it'll last. I guess. Um, I don't think that Xabi Alonso was wrong or limited in what he tried to implement. I think that what he was missing was time, context, and players that were actually willing to sacrifice and buy into his system. He had the whole dressing room against him, or at least the heavy hitters, the heavyweights there. So yeah, yeah. I don't think you're a hater, man. I think your doubts are rightfully placed. I think this hype now is what the Madrid press have to do in order to improve the mood. I mean, you already see Giuseppe Pedrol talking about the change in manager was the right decision, but you're right to question that, and that's not being negative. You're just being critical. That's just analysis. All right. I think we have one more. It wasn't a question, but it was another funny comment from Patrick Casau saying that something I truly enjoy about being a Churros Patreon is the backlog catalog. I went all the way back to the first episode. That would be fun. That's something I need to do. And was equally shocked to hear Kian's young, innocent voice and the fact that Diego's voice hasn't changed in 7 years. There are some true gems among those early episodes, and I'm slowly catching up. Damn, Patrick. Thank you both. Well, dude, thank you, man. I wrote you a quick comment. I thought that was absolutely awesome. I love that dedication and your support. A true Patreon going all the way back to the early first episodes. How long ago was that? I told Keon the other day, I'm like, dude, do you realize we are just shy off of 10 years, man? We've been doing this for nearly a decade. And yeah, very proud of it too. And like I said, couldn't do it without you. You guys are the backbone. You guys are the reason that we pick up this mic on a bi-weekly basis. Twice a week, you get your churros. And of course, this being the absolute cherry on top when I get to address and hear from you exclusively. I would like to get you guys more in a pod as well. There's different tiers that you can pick from. There's the tier that you can join us and be live and interact with us as well. We will be back next week. The dynamic duo, the most underrated one in football podcasting. Thank you all for your support. I wish you a lovely weekend. Visca el Barça. Down with the Whites. But thank you for your questions nonetheless. And we'll address them once again next week. All right, stay blessed. Peace out.